Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we are analyzing something fundamental to the global marketplace, the economic policy known as protectionism. Okay, so let's unpack this. We've waded through quite a stack of sources here. We're talking definitions, policy deep dives, economic consensus reports, and a pretty huge historical sweepthink colonial tariffs, all the way to modern IP fights.
Right.
And our mission in this deep dive is really to cut through some of the political noise that always surrounds this topic.
Yeah, it's unavoidable.
We want to distill what protectionism actually is, how governments really use these policies, sometimes, quite subtly, with hidden mechanisms. And crucially, understand why there's such a strong and long-standing consensus among mainstream economists against it.
That's the core challenge, isn't it? Moving past the headlines, protectionism at its heart is the official government policy of restricting imports from other countries.
Simple definition, but complex reality.
Exactly. Whether it's through tariffs, quotas, or complex regulations, these policies have a massive impact. They shape how nations interact, who gets wealthier, and, ultimately the standard of living for, billions of people.
Okay, let's start with the basics, the classic tools in the protectionist toolkit, the ones most people think of.
You mean tariffs and quotas?
Exactly. Tariffs basically taxes on imported goods, and import quotas, which are just straightforward limits on how much of something can come in.
Right. And these visible tools, they bring up this debate that just seems to go round and round, doesn't it?
Always.
Proponents will argue, look, this is vital. We need to shield our domestic producers, our businesses, our workers, the ones competing directly with imports.
And it raises money for the government too, right?
Yeah.
Historically, that was huge.
Absolutely. That was a major source of revenue for many governments for a long time. But the counter-argument is, pretty powerful. These policies shrink overall trade. They hurt consumers because goods just get more expensive. And, importantly, they often harm your own export sectors because other countries retaliate.
Yeah, the tit-for-tat situation.
Precisely.
And this isn't just an economic debate happening in a vacuum. The sources we looked at point to really clear political alignments here.
Oh, definitely. Protectionism tends to be advocated by parties with more economic nationalist leanings, favoring state intervention, prioritizing domestic control over maybe global efficiency.
Whereas the free trade side,
That's generally championed by more economically liberal parties. They emphasize individual actors, market efficiency driving policy. It's a fundamental ideological split, really. Hashtag The Economist's verdict and real-world impact.
Okay, so the politics might be divided, but when we shift to the economic perspective, particularly the broad consensus among economists, it's strikingly different. What does the research overwhelmingly tell us?
The consensus is remarkably strong. Economists widely agree that protectionism generally has a negative impact on economic growth and overall welfare.
Negative. Not neutral, but negative.
Correct. And the flip side holds true, too. Reducing trade barriers tends to have a significantly positive demonstrable effect. It really comes down to that core idea of comparative advantage.
You mean countries specializing in what they do best?
Exactly. The theory is that the total gains from letting countries specialize and trade freely far outweigh any localized job losses in specific sectors.
So it's not a zero-sum game where restricting imports helps one group and hurts another equally. The whole system actually loses something.
The whole system loses. That's the concept economists call deadweight loss. Protectionism creates this loss in overall economic welfare that crucially doesn't benefit anyone. It's just wealth destroyed through inefficiency.
Destroyed value.
Yeah. When economists argue against protectionism, they're often pointing directly at this measurable destruction of value. There was one economist, Stephen McGee, who famously estimated the benefits of free trade could outweigh the losses by 100 to 1.
Wow. And is there actual data backing this up beyond the fear?
Oh, yes. Lots of empirical data. For instance, a 2016 study found free trade generally benefits lower-income consumers more.
How so?
Because they spend a larger chunk of their income on basic goods, things like clothing, food, electronics, and free trade tends to lower the prices of precisely those goods.
Makes sense, like when China joined the WTO.
Exactly. Research showed that Harahade had a substantial benefit for U.S. consumers, driving down the prices of many manufactured goods. And there's other work, like a 2019 study by Fursery and colleagues, that specifically looked at tariff increases.
What did they find?
They found tariff hikes have a significant adverse impact on domestic output and productivity, so they actually slow down the very economy they're supposedly trying to protect.
That consensus is, it's surprisingly stark. If it's so widely accepted that protectionism damages the economy overall, are there any exceptions? Any arguments that economists take seriously, even with caveats?
There is one main one, the famous infant industry argument.
Ah, yes, heard of that.
Mainstream economists will generally concede that, okay, in theory, tariffs could help a brand new, maybe strategically important domestic industry get off the ground, protect it while it's still small and vulnerable.
But there's always a but.
There's always a but, and it's a big one. For this to actually work, two critical conditions have to be met. First, the protection, the tariffs, they have to be genuinely temporary.
Which is hard in politics.
Extremely hard. Second, the government has to be really good at picking the winners, identifying which industries truly deserve and will benefit from this temporary shield.
And the track record there isn't great.
Historically, no. The failures often outweigh the successes. What happens too often is these temporary tariffs become permanent political fixtures, just sheltering inefficient companies that charge high prices indefinitely. Hashtag the specific tools of protectionism.
Okay, so if that's the verdict on the obvious tools like tariffs, let's get into the sneakier stuff.
Yeah.
The ways governments try to restrict trade without, putting up a big sign saying tariff. This is the hidden trade war, isn't it?
That's a good way to put it. Yeah, modern protectionism is often less about a big visible tariff wall and more about using, shall we say, more nuanced tools, sometimes even hiding them within what looks like necessary domestic regulation.
Like what? Give us some examples.
Okay, well, take administrative barriers. A country might introduce really complex, really costly rules, maybe for food safety or environmental standards or electrical certification.
Things that sound reasonable on the surface.
Yeah, exactly. They might be perfectly legitimate goals on paper, but in practice, they can be designed or just implemented in a way that makes it incredibly difficult or expensive for foreign companies to comply. They act as de facto import barriers.
I see. What else?
Then there's anti-dumping legislation. The idea here is to stop foreign firms from dumping goods, selling them below their cost of production or cheaper than they sell them at home.
Which sounds fair enough if it's really happening.
Right, if it's really happening. True predatory dumping can exist. But these laws often become a very convenient, legally justifiable way to slap tariffs on foreign exporters. Even if the evidence for actual dumping is maybe a bit shaky, it's a tool that can be easily misused.
And what about messing with currencies? We hear about governments trying to make their exports cheaper that way.
Ah, yes. Exchange rate control. A government can step into the foreign exchange market and actively sell its own currency.
Driving down its value.
Exactly. Which instantly makes imports more expensive for its own citizens and makes its exports cheaper for foreigners. So it looks like a quick fix for the trade balance.
But does it last?
Well, the sources are pretty clear. Not really. It tends to work only in the short run. Pretty soon, the cheaper currency leads to higher domestic inflation. Things just cost more at home, and that inflation eventually eats away the entire competitive advantage. It's a temporary fix at best.
Okay, so barriers, anti-dumping, currency games.
Yeah.
But you mentioned intellectual property, IP. That feels like a very modern battleground.
It absolutely is. Patents, copyrights. These can be used not just to protect an invention, but to protect market share in a way that functions like protectionism.
How does that work?
Well, Peter Drahos, an academic who studies this, argued that governments realized that patent systems could be used to, in his words, cloak protectionist strategies.
Cloak them?
Yeah. By signing up to international patent agreements, a country looks like a good global citizen. But internally, how they design and enforce their IP laws can act as a really potent protectionist weapon. It can block cheaper generic versions or alternative products from ever reaching the market.
And the big flashpoint here, according to the sources, seems to be TRIPS, the Agreement on Trade-Related Aspects of Intellectual Property Rights.
Exactly. TRIPS sets global minimum standards for IP regulation for all WTO members. But it became controversial almost immediately, particularly because of how it limits competition from generic medicines.
Especially for essential medicines, right?
That's where the tension really blew up. First, internationally, over-access to affordable AIDS drugs in Africa. That led to the Doha Declaration, which tried to clarify that TRIPS shouldn't stop countries from tackling public health crises, allowing things like compulsory licensing.
But the issue didn't go away.
No, it came roaring back during the COVID-19 pandemic.
Ah, the vaccine patent debate. India and South Africa proposed a temporary waiver.
They did, arguing that lifting patent restrictions temporarily was crucial to allow vaccine production worldwide, especially in developing countries.
And what happened?
Well, over 100 developing nations supported that waiver, but it was ultimately blocked mainly by G7 members. They eventually agreed on a much weaker deal in 2022, focused only on vaccine patents and excluding many countries. It really highlights how IP law itself can function as this powerful, modern tool of trade policy, often protecting established industries in richer countries.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit and look back. Let's trace the history. If we zoom out, what does the past tell us about the relationship between, say, trade barriers and actual armed conflict? Does protectionism lead to peace or war?
Well, history gives us conflicting stories there, doesn't it? You have the famous warning from the French economist Frédéric Bastiat: when goods cannot cross borders, armies will.
The idea being that trade ties prevent war.
Right. Proponents of that view would point to, say, the constant warfare in mercantilist Europe in the 17th and 18th centuries, when trade was heavily controlled and seen as a zero-sum game between nations.
But there's a counterargument.
There is a serious one. Some historians, like Lawrence Keeley, actually argue the opposite. They say disputes between trading partners escalate to war more often than disputes between nations that don't trade much.
Really? Like what?
The classic stark example is the Opium Wars. The UK literally fought China for the right to freely trade opium into their country. That wasn't about lack of trade causing war. It was about forcing trade.
That complicates the simple trade equals peace idea.
It does. And you also have observations like Barbara Tuchman's about the lead up to World War I. Leaders at the time vastly overestimated how much economic interconnectedness would prevent war. They thought the financial pain would be too great to risk conflict.
But they went to war anyway.
Tragically, yes.
Yeah.
So the economic theory didn't hold up against other political and military pressures.
Okay, let's zoom in on the U.S. experience. Douglas Irwin, a trade historian we looked at, divides U.S. trade policy into roughly 3 distinct eras. What were they?
Right. The first he calls the revenue period, basically from 1790 up to about 1860.
Revenue, meaning tariffs were mainly for
Raising money for the federal government. During that whole period, tariffs weren't primarily about protecting industry. They were the main source of federal income. We're talking like 90% of all federal receipts.
90%. Wow. Why tariffs?
They were politically easier than other taxes, simpler to collect at just a few major ports, Boston, Charleston, New York, and less visible to the average person than, say, a direct tax on goods like the one that caused the Whiskey Rebellion.
Okay, so revenue first. What changed after 1860?
The Civil War shifted political power north towards manufacturing interests. That kicks off Irwin's second era, the restriction period, from about 1866 to 1928.
Restriction implies higher tariffs now focused on
Protecting domestic industries, yes. Tariffs shot up levels of 40%, 50%, and they stayed high for decades. Now, Irwin cautions against the common myth that these high tariffs caused America's industrial rise.
Oh, what does he attribute it to then?
He argues growth was driven much more by other factors: vast natural resources, huge waves of immigration providing labor, and significant foreign investment. The tariffs might have helped some specific industries, but weren't the main engine.
Okay, so high tariffs dominated for a long time. And this leads us eventually to the Great Depression and that infamous Tariff Act.
The Smoot-Hawley tariff of 1930, yes. That pushed the average tariff rate up even further, from around 40% to 47%. Now, there's debate about its exact impact. Well, someone like Paul Krugman, a new Keynesian economist, might view it primarily as a source of allocative inefficiency, basically, making the economy slightly less efficient, but not the main cause of the Depression itself.
But Irwin sees it differently.
Irwin argues it was much more damaging, not just the direct effect, but the indirect effects. It provoked swift international retaliation. Other countries raised their tariffs, too. It completely undermined global cooperation just when it was desperately needed. And it pushed countries into forming these kind of closed-off discriminatory trading blocs. It significantly worsened the global situation.
That's a powerful lesson. And the UK also had some dramatic swings, right? From extreme protectionism to radical free trade and back again.
Absolutely. They went from strict mercantilist policies in the colonial era, like the Navigation Acts, which actively tried to prevent industries from developing in the colonies, to a complete U-turn with the repeal of the Corn Laws in 1846.
Which was a huge deal, lowering food prices.
A massive political shift, yes, lowering living costs for British workers and signaling a commitment to free trade. But then, like the U.S., they abandoned free trade again during the tough interwar years, with the Import Duties Act of 1932 bringing back widespread tariffs.
And maybe one quick global example to contrast policies.
Argentina is a really concise, powerful case study. In the late 19th, early 20th century, say 1880 to 1929, during that era of globalization and low trade costs, Argentina boomed as a super exporter of agricultural goods.
Because they embraced trade.
Right. But then, fast forward to the 1940s under Juan Perón, they shifted to an almost completely protectionist system, aiming for self-sufficiency.
And the result?
It created domestic industries that were very high cost and inefficient. It led to stagnation in their key exports, like beef and grain, because they weren't competitive anymore, and ultimately slower economic growth compared to many of their neighbors who remained more open.
So we bring it up to today. And despite all these historical examples, all of the economic consensus, it feels like the world is kind of tilting back towards more restrictive trade policies again.
It certainly seems that way. It's a noticeable global trend. You know, it's quite ironic. Back in 2009, right after the financial crisis, the G20 leaders got together and explicitly pledged, quote, "We will not repeat the historic mistakes of protectionism."
Famous last words.
Apparently, because within just a few years, studies showed something like 17 out of those 20 countries had actually imposed new trade restrictive measures. And that trend has broadly continued through the 2010s and into the early 2020s.
We saw things like the U.S. pulling out of the Trans-Pacific Partnership.
Right. President Trump made that a signature move.
Right.
And while the rhetoric might change slightly, President Biden's administration has actually kept many of those same trade restrictions in place, maybe using different justifications like national security or supply chain resilience.
So wrapping this up, what we've really distilled from all these sources is that protectionism, well, it's rarely as simple as the slogans make it sound. It's often less about purely saving jobs and more about, complex legal fights, government revenue needs, geopolitical chess moves, or even weaponizing things like patent law.
Indeed. I think we really need to broaden our understanding of trade conflict. We have to stop thinking of trade wars only in terms of tariffs paid at the border. The trade conflicts of the 21st century are increasingly being fought in these regulatory arenas, in intellectual property disputes and setting technical standards.
That leaves us with a final provocative thought for you, our listener, to mull over. We've seen the historical evidence. High tariffs often lead to unintended consequences, like global trade wars and hitting consumers in the wallet. So the question is, what contemporary non-tariff policies, maybe those subtle administrative standards, specific food safety rules designed just so, or perhaps these modern IP laws we discussed, what might we look back on in, say, 50 years and recognize as the most damaging, most cleverly disguised form of protectionism that we're living through right now? That was The Deep Dive. We'll see you next time.
Okay, let's unpack this. When you hear Oktoberfest, you probably picture millions of people, right? Giant beer steins, maybe someone in lederhosen struggling to stand up. It's like the ultimate global party stereotype.
It really is, but the sources we're diving into show that the reality of Oktoberfest, the world's largest Volksfest, it operates less like some spontaneous party and more like a high-stakes temporary city.
A temporary city.
Yeah, built on massive logistics and these incredibly strict, almost medieval rules. Our mission here really is to understand the complexity, the history, and just the sheer scale that makes this event possible every single year.
And scale is the word. We really need to grasp the sheer volume here. We're talking about an event held annually in Munich on the Theresienwiese locals, just call it the Wiesn.
Right, the Wiesn.
And even though it's Oktoberfest, it usually kicks off mid-September, running to the first Sunday in October. Sometimes it even stretches through German Unity Day on October 3rd.
And the numbers, well, they speak for themselves. 2023 attendance hit a record 7.2 million visitors. Think about that.
7.2 million.
Yeah, and get this. The 2024 projections, they show visitors consuming approximately 7.4 million liters of beer.
Whoa.
That's more than a liter per person over the whole festival. It's just an astronomical logistical challenge.
Which makes the origin story so, charmingly small. And really surprising. It wasn't started by a brewer or anything like that.
No, not at all. It was royalty needing a place to celebrate. That's the key disconnect,
Okay.
It all began October 12, 1810. Celebrating the marriage of Crown Prince Ludwig of Bavaria and Princess Therese of Saxony-Hildburghausen.
Yeah.
and they named the site Theresienwiese after the bride.
Therese's meadow, basically. And the main event wasn't downing 7 million liters of beer.
Not even close. It was a sporting event.
A horse race.
Exactly. Major Andreas Michael Delorme proposed this massive horse race modeled on the medieval Charlottenrennen. That whole spectacle, 30 horses running this long course, it was such a hit that when the city repeated the festival in 1811, the race was the core tradition. It was like a field day, not really a beer bash yet.
So how does a royal horse race turn into this global giant? What were the first big steps in the Weizen's evolution?
Well, the first step was integration. In 1811, right away, they added an agricultural show, promote Bavarian farming.
Makes sense.
Then by 1814, you started seeing amusements, skittles, swings, climbing poles. It was quickly turning into a proper public fair.
And by 1818, carnival booths, offering prizes like silverware, porcelain. That's when the city council stepped in, right? Took control in 1819.
Yep, declared it an annual event. Really cemented its place in the Bavarian calendar.
Okay, so it's growing, becoming a fixture.
But here's where the Weizen becomes globally significant, like way before it was a tourist magnet. We found a source noting that a Greek delegation back in 1832, they actually cited this festival as a model for the Zappas Olympics.
Wait, what? The Zappas Olympics, like precursors to the modern Olympic Games.
There's the one.
You're telling me a Greek delegation looked at a horse race, an agricultural show, and a fair in Bavaria and thought, yeah, that's our template for global athletic competition. That's pretty amazing. An incredible footnote.
It really is. It connected tradition and spectacle in a way that, well, apparently resonated. Now, moving into modernization, they pretty quickly shifted the calendar.
Right, you mentioned that. Moved the opening into September.
Just to get those warmer evenings.
Yeah.
Simple as that.
And then the late 19th century brought huge changes, technologically speaking.
Oh, yeah. Big leap. By 1880, electric lighting illuminated over 400 booths and tents. Imagine that change in atmosphere.
Completely different feel, I bet.
It was, along with the beer service. Bratwurst stalls opened in 1881, and crucially, beer started being served in glass mugs in 1892.
Instead of the old earthenware ones.
Exactly. And then, around 1900, those small booths, they got replaced by the enormous custom-built large beer halls that, define the festival today. That was the moment it really scaled up.
But it wasn't smooth sailing. History wasn't always kind to the festival. Lots of interruptions.
Unfortunately, yeah. It got canceled because of cholera epidemics in 1854 and 1873.
Wow, cholera.
And then various wars, the Austro-Prussian, Franco-Prussian, World War I, World War II. It was also suspended during those devastating hyperinflation years, 1923, 1924.
And we can't just gloss over the darker periods either. The sources are clear. It was used for Nazi propaganda, 33 to 45.
That's right. And chillingly, Jewish people were actually barred from working at the Wiese starting in 1933.
Very dark stain.
And even in the modern era, the event was hit brutally by the 1980 bombing. A pipe bomb near the main entrance killed 13 people, injured over 225.
Still Germany's second deadliest terrorist attack.
It is. And as we'll get into, that profoundly shaped the security measures you see today.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit. Let's talk about the traditions that really anchor the festival. So starting with that official opening. Since 1950, it's been this very precise ceremony.
Like clockwork, the mayor of Munich taps the first keg in the Schottenhamel tent. Exactly 12 p.m. noon. There's a 12-gun salute and the big shout, "O Zaftis!"
Which means...
It's tapped.
Right. But the fun part, maybe the slightly stressful part for the mayor, is the judgment, right? How many swings does it take?
Oh, absolutely. The crowd is totally focused on the count. Multiple mayors have managed the perfect two strokes. Impressive under pressure.
But the record for the worst.
That belongs to Thomas Wimmer. 1950. He needed a staggering 19 strokes to open the festival.
19? Oh, man. Imagine the collective groan from the crowd. Talk about a tough start to the party.
Definitely. Beyond the tapping, the festival is framed by these two really spectacular processions, these parades.
Okay, what are they?
The first one is the opening parade, kind of sets the mood.
Yeah.
It features the Münchner Kindle mascot.
That's the Munich child monk figure.
That's the one. Leading decorated horse-drawn wagons and floats from all the participating breweries. It's been in its current form since 1935.
And then there's the really massive one, the Costume and Rifleman Parade, the Trachten and Schützenzug. That's on the first Sunday.
Yeah, and it's huge, a real spectacle of scale and culture. You've got around 8,000 participants walking a 7-kilometer route.
8,000 people.
Yep. Costume groups, rifle clubs, flag wavers, from all over Bavaria and even neighboring regions. It's basically a parade of history.
Now, let's get to the heart of it. The beer. You mentioned 7.4 million liters. That beer constraint rule must be like the single most important thing defining the whole event's identity.
It is absolutely the ultimate boundary. The rule is totally non-negotiable. Only beer brewed within Munich's city limits.
Only inside the city.
And it has to strictly follow the Reinheitsgebot, the Bavarian purity law from way back in 1487.
1487, wow. That's how a global event keeps this fiercely local identity. So who are the chosen few? The breweries.
There are only 6.
Yeah.
Gessner Bräu, Hackert Schor, Hofbräu München, Lohenbräu, Paulaner, and Spaten. That's it.
Just those 6.
Historically, they served the traditional dark Märzen lager, but today you'll mostly find the paler seasonal fest beer in the tents. That's more common now.
And if drinking a liter of beer isn't quite enough of a challenge, there's that unofficial sport. Maskrugsstemmen.
Steinholding, yes. It's a test of pure agony, really. Competitors hold a filled 1-liter dimpled glass mug that's a mass with their arms stretched straight out for as long as possible.
Sounds brutal.
Simple, brutal, and yeah, perfect display of Bavarian endurance, you could say.
Okay, you called this thing a high-stakes temporary city earlier. What does that actually look like behind the scenes? Let's peel back the curtain a bit. Infrastructure, logistics. Hosting 7 million people needs planning on a, well, near military scale, doesn't it?
The scale is just staggering because remember, none of it's permanent. Those 14 large and 20 small tents, they're custom-built wooden structures, non-permanent, erected and dismantled every single year.
Wow, every year. And they're huge, right? Like the Windsor Refundable tent.
That one alone seats 8,450 people inside, just inside.
That's a small town's population in one tent. And some are specialized too, like focusing on specific food.
Exactly. You got the Ochsenbraterei, which is dedicated entirely to roasted ox.
Roasted ox, okay.
And the Fischer Vroni, famous for its grilled steckelfish, that's fish grilled on a stick. Very traditional.
So the infrastructure to power all this, it must be immense.
Truly impressive. The energy supply needs 43 kilometers of cable, 18 transformer stations, and it consumes around 2.9 million kilowatt hours annually.
That's a huge amount of power.
It is, but what really safeguards the whole operation is the fully redundant electrical grid.
Fully redundant, what does that actually mean in this context?
It means every single circuit can be fed from an independent line. Every marquee, every tent gets power from 2 separate substations, so if one goes down...
The money doesn't stop.
Exactly. They even use certified green electricity now, which adds another layer of complexity. That level of, necessary over-engineering tells you a lot.
And with 7 million people, plus all that beer, inevitably people need help. Medical aid, other services. They have a central hub for that, right on site.
They do. It's called the Behördenhof. Basically means authorities court. It's a centralized service hub, brings together police, fire services, medical teams, all in one place.
And the medical side is serious.
Very. Run by the German Red Cross. About 100 volunteer doctors and paramedics working daily. And they operate what's essentially a miniature hospital. It even has an operating theater.
An operating theater on site. That's incredible foresight. The Behördenhof handles other things too, right? Less critical stuff.
Yeah, essential non-emergency services, like the station for reuniting lost children with their parents, and of course the lost property office, which must be quite something.
I can only imagine what turns up there. Now, connecting back to that awful 1980 tragedy, security protocols are literally built into the physical layout now.
They are, and crucially, all public trash bins were permanently removed after the bombing.
No public trash cans at all.
None, to prevent anyone concealing explosives.
That is such a stark, visible reminder of the security cost. Does that mean the entire cleanup relies on specific personnel going around constantly? That must add a whole layer of logistical complexity.
It absolutely does. And that's just one of the physical restrictions.
Yeah.
They've added more recently, too. Animals were banned in 2010.
Okay.
Glass bottles prohibited in 2012, too many injuries. And since 2016, bags over 3 liters are banned. You can't bring in large backpacks.
Right. And post 9/11 security is layered in too.
Definitely. Permanent checkpoints now, 3 security rings around the grounds, concrete bollards, retractable ones too, and even flight restrictions over the area. It is locked down tight.
Let's move to some of the unique cultural dimensions, things that keep the spirit alive amidst all this scale and security, starting with the attempt to, well, turn the volume down a bit.
Yeah, the organizers realized they needed to balance the party with tradition. So in 2005, they introduced the Quiet Oktoberfest.
Quiet Oktoberfest, how does that work?
Until 6 p.m., The tents are only allowed to play traditional brass band music. No pop hits, no loud party anthems, and the volume itself is capped at 85 decibels. Oh, no. Okay. More traditional vibes early on. Exactly. And this push for tradition also lined up with Bavaria bringing in a strict smoking ban. So the festival became fully smoke-free from 2011 onwards.
Now, my favorite discovery in the sources, I think, is the Oidweisen, the old fairground. This sounds like intentional historical preservation happening right next door.
It is. It was initially set up for the 200th anniversary back in 2010, but it was such a hit, so popular, that it became a permanent feature.
So what's it like? How is it different?
It's distinct. You've got historic rides, carousels, chain swings from way back. There's a museum tent explaining the history, special food stalls, and the beer.
Ah, the beer's different too.
Yeah, they serve a special dark beer, brewed according to an early 19th century recipe. Very traditional.
And unlike the main fair, you have to pay to get in. A few euros, and it closes earlier.
That's right. €3 entry, and it wraps up around 8 p.m. It really feels like they are deliberately investing in preserving this historical, quieter, maybe less commercial version of their own massive event.
It's fascinating, like a festival within a festival.
It is. And then you also have the Rosa Wiesen, the Pink event,
Yeah.
which is a really key week-long series of LGBT events within Oktoberfest.
Okay.
The main focus is Gay Sunday, held in the Broreal tent. Draws about 8,000 visitors, a huge gathering.
And the origin story for that is just fantastic, isn't it?
It really is. It apparently started back in the 1970s.
Yeah.
Members of the local gay leather and fetish club, the Münchner Lowen Club,
Uh-huh.
they accidentally booked a table, and the staff mistook them for a football club because of the name Lions Club. They were welcomed with open arms, and it just grew from there. Started this wonderful tradition of inclusivity that's now a major part of the festival.
A happy accident that became a tradition.
Yeah.
Love that. And while Munich is obviously the benchmark, the original, this whole concept has spread globally, hasn't it?
Oh, massively.
Yeah.
The largest international versions. You've got Qingdao in China. That draws 3 million visitors.
3 million in China. Wow.
Yeah. Then Kitchener-Waterloo in Canada gets around 700,000. And Oktoberfest Cincinnati in the U.S., that pulls in about 500,000 people.
So the idea travels well, and this tension we've been talking about between tradition and scale even shows up in pop culture.
Absolutely. There was that 2020 German historical drama, Oktoberfest, Beer and Blood.
Right, I heard about
It
that.
fictionalizes that moment of modernization around 1900,
Hmm.
focuses on this ruthless showman figure who works to replace all the small, old-fashioned beer booths
Yeah.
with the giant pavilions we see today.
So it captures that turning point.
Perfectly illustrates the dynamic we've been tracking, yeah. This necessary conflict almost between
Yeah.
holding on to history and accommodating just massive industrial scale.
Absolutely. So what have we learned here? We kicked off with a simple royal wedding celebration, a horse race back in 1810. And we've ended up with this multi-million visitor, highly engineered cultural juggernaut, rooted in these incredibly strict Bavarian beer laws and operating with the precision of like a massive utility company.
I think what really stands out is the deep contradiction, right, at the heart of the Wiesen. It's this place of massive, overwhelming, seemingly carefree joy. Yet that joy is completely underpinned by intensely detailed, often very expensive logistics. That miniature hospital, the redundant power grid, the security rings, the ban on simple things like trash cans. The modern festival is really a highly engineered response to the historical dangers it's faced and the sheer scale it's managed to achieve.
So what does this all mean for you listening in?
Well, you think about the paradox of success here. Despite its global reputation, its huge financial toll, the Bavarian City Council actively supported keeping the Oidwiesen. They chose to invest time and space in preserving a historical, smaller, quieter past, instead of just optimizing purely for profit and growth.
That's a powerful choice.
It is, so ask yourself, what does it really mean for a massive global attraction to deliberately limit itself? Through things like the strict Reinheitsgebot, through removing modern conveniences like trash bins for safety, and through intentionally preserving its own past, rather than just continually expanding its footprint. That connection between global ambition and radical local restriction, that might be the real secret sauce that keeps the Venus feeling authentic, even at this scale. Welcome back to the Deep Dive. You know the drill. We take a whole stack of sources, pull out the absolute must-know insights, and basically give you the shortcut to being, well, genuinely informed. Today, we're diving into the work of Ted Chiang. He's definitely one of modern science fiction's most respected and most deliberate authors. We're zoning in on his second short story collection, Exhalation. Stories. It came out May 7th, 2019. Alfred A. Knopf published it, 368 pages, hardcover. Now, Chiang's first collection, Stories of Your Life and Others, that had the story the movie Arrival was based on. So when Exhalation landed, like 17 years later, it was a big deal. A major cultural event, really.
Okay.
So our mission here, to get a quick handle on the core ideas, the awards, the reviews, basically why everyone agreed this was an instant classic.
Yeah, and what's really key to understanding Chiang, I think, is that his work isn't just typical sci-fi. It's almost more like pure philosophy using sci-fi tools.
Yeah.
Technology for him is often just a way to set up a thought experiment. And this collection, with its 9 stories, it just jumps right into these huge questions most books wouldn't touch.
Okay, let's unpack that a bit. So we're saying it's not just about like inventing cool gadgets, it's using the idea of a gadget to kind of probe our own reality. What are the really big themes that the sources kept bringing up for this collection?
Oh, they're massive. And they all sort of connect. Things like humankind's place in the cosmos, what consciousness even is, bioethics, virtual reality, AI, specifically robotic AI. But maybe the one that comes up again and again, and it's super compelling, is that age-old debate. Free will versus determinism. And he often links that up with time travel ideas.
That sounds incredibly dense.
Yeah.
But reviewers praised how accessible he makes it, right? So if he's tackling something as huge as determinism, how does he make that relatable? Can you maybe give an example, like a story hook that shows this philosophical angle?
Sure. That's what makes the work stand out. I think Vox put it well, saying it takes both science and humanism deeply seriously. Take the story, What's Expected of Us. It's about perfect prediction. He imagines this little device, a Turing-lit he calls it, and it predicts your choice, like instantly, just moments before you actually make it.
Oh, wow. So if you know exactly what you're going to do right before you do it, the whole feeling of making a choice just disappears.
Yeah.
That sense of free will.
Exactly. That's the core of it. The story isn't really about the gadget. It's about what happens to society when people suddenly feel they have no real agency. Or maybe worse, that their agency is totally predictable, so what's the point? It's basically epistemology, the study of knowledge, but dressed up as a short story. That's the kind of intellectual move that really defines Exhalation.
Right. That depth explains why it got so much praise so quickly. And structurally, it's interesting, too. It's got 9 stories. Like you said, 7 were already published, right, between 2005 and 2015. But then 2 were brand new for this book, Omphalos, and that closing novella, Anxiety is the Dizziness of Freedom.
Yeah, and that's something you really need to appreciate, the sheer density of proven quality here.
Yeah.
These aren't just filler pieces around the new ones. Several of these stories had already won major awards, like the biggest awards in sci-fi, just on their own, years before being collected. It shows the high level he was working at all along.
Looking at the awards, yeah, the list is pretty staggering. We probably don't need to list every single one, but the sheer volume of them really says something about the mastery involved.
If you look at the big picture, just 3 of these stories basically swept the board. The Merchant and the Alchemist's Gate, Exhalation, and the life cycle of software objects between them, they racked up multiple Hugos and Nebulas. Those are, the Oscars of the genre.
And just to pause there for you listening, the sources point out it wasn't just U.S. awards, was it? It was more global.
That's right. Good point. The Merchant and the Alchemist's Gate also won the Seiun Award. That's the top Japanese sci-fi award. Winning that shows real global recognition, for the story, the ideas. And the title story, Exhalation, it won the BSFA, the British Science Fiction Association Award. So yeah, these ideas were clearly hitting home across different cultures.
That definitely speaks to the universal appeal. Let's focus on that title story, Exhalation, for a sec. The one that won the BSFA, Locus, and Hugo. What's the core idea there that resonated so widely?
Okay, so Exhalation is told by a member of an alien race. They're mechanical beings powered by air pressure differences using mercury lungs, basically. And the story is, at its heart, a meditation on entropy. The narrator, who's a scientist, discovers that the pressure in their universe is equalizing, which means everything will stop. Their civilization, their individual lives, everything will just run down.
Ah, okay. So it's fundamentally a story about mortality, about existential dread,
Mm-hmm.
but told through physics and robots. It's like the ultimate human fear, but filtered through this mechanical, objective lens.
Precisely. And it somehow makes you feel this profound, almost human sadness for the end of this purely mechanical intelligence. That trick getting deep emotional truth out of a cold scientific premise that is pure Ted Chiang. That's his signature move.
Okay, so we mentioned the 7 previously published stories, but also the 2 new ones. And because his first collection led to a rival, people were obviously watching those new ones very closely. That final novella, Anxiety is the Dizziness of Freedom, it was immediately seen as a major piece, right? Became a Hugo and Nebula finalist straight away.
Absolutely. That one's pretty long, about 70 pages, and it definitely generated a lot of buzz. The AV Club review even said it had a shot at becoming the next arrival. The premise involves something called prims. They're like parallel selves you can communicate with using this quantum device. Every time you make a significant choice, a prim branches off, living out the reality of the choice you didn't make.
Right. So the drama isn't the tech, it's the anxiety it creates, the sort of psychological weight of knowing there's another you out there who took the other road. The title just nails it.
It really does capture it perfectly. It's all about the burden of potential, of regret, of what if, and this focus on the ethical, the psychological fallout that leads us nicely into how critics receive the whole book, the broader consensus.
Yeah, it seems like that intellectual clarity, that philosophical depth, is what pushed Exhalation beyond just the sci-fi shelf. When you see major literary critics weighing in, you know something's crossed over.
Exactly. And the praise wasn't just cool ideas, it was about the depth. Joyce Carol Oates, writing for The New Yorker, I mean, that's a major literary voice she didn't hold back. She had this really sharp line summarizing his talent, saying, "From technological ingenuity flows ethical intricacy."
That really defines the shift, doesn't it? It's not the invention itself, but the ethical maze that comes after. Oates also said the stories tend to stick with you, like riddles may linger teasing, tormenting, illuminating, thrilling, which suggests they're designed to make you keep thinking long after you put the book down.
That link between the tech idea and the ethical consequence is also what Kirkus reviews picked up on. They called the book visionary, speculative stories that will change the way readers see themselves and the world around them. So not just escape, but tools for self-reflection.
And Publishers Weekly noted how Chiang produces deeply moving drama from fascinating first premises. It's that combination, isn't it? The sort of cool hard science concept paired with genuine, human, non-human, but relatable emotion.
Yeah, that seems to be the unique blend. It stops it from just being a dry thought experiment.
And the recognition really bears that out. This mix of depth and readability led to huge mainstream acclaim.
Yeah, it was named one of the top 10 books of 2019 by the New York Times Book Review. That puts it right alongside major literary fiction, not just genre stuff.
And maybe the biggest pop culture seal of approval in the U.S. that year, President Barack Obama put it on his 2019's summer reading list. When that happens, you know a book is broken through. It's not just for sci-fi fans anymore. It's part of the broader cultural conversation. Required reading almost. So wrapping this up for you, the listener, what we have with Exhalation. Stories is a collection that really delivers across the board. You've got deep philosophical dives into free will, time, AI. You've got 7 award-winning stories plus 2 incredible new ones, including that novella people thought could be the next arrival. And you have this waves of universal critical praise, all focusing on the ethical weight and the intellectual power of the work.
Right. And I think what the sources really emphasize collectively is how this collection, coming so long after his first, marks a bit of a shift. While the early stuff was maybe more about the sheer wow factor of the invention, Exhalation is celebrated for the ethical intricacy that springs from the ideas. The science is the starting point, but the destination is this really rigorous look at the human consequences. So maybe a final thought for you to chew on as you explore this material. When you encounter these complex ideas, is it the ethical fallout, the psychological impact that ultimately holds the most value? Does it overshadow that initial spark of invention? What stands out more in Chiang's success, do you think? Is it the purity of the science concept, or is it the profound humanity he manages to extract from it?